All right, we're back. We are COMP125 in the summer 2018 semester at Centennial. It's client-side web development, and we are week 3, part 2 of our broadcasts, and we're talking about arrays and loops. Continued yesterday, or the previous lesson anyway, what we did yesterday and we recorded. We talked about a few things. We talked about GitHub pages. Which is something that I recommend that you use for your assignment number 1. We also talked about arrays. We also talked about that arrays in JavaScript are like lists to some degree, right? That's what we talked about yesterday. We didn't talk for loops and if statements and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to cover a couple things today. And the other thing I want to cover today is also this one requirement that some people have asked me about, which is, hey, how do I make a logo? And I'm going to use a free tool that you can download called Krita. All right, so Krita, and I'll bring it up in a second. So let's start with that one. So we're going to go to, I want to make a logo, and I don't expect you guys to be, yeah? I'm going to do that right now, right? So I'm going to look for Krita. So it's spelled like K-R-I-T-A. And it's a free tool. There's other ones too. You can also use GIMP and Inkscape and a bunch of other ones, but Krita is actually a really cool tool, so I'm going to copy this one and put it in our Slack channel. So here's Krita. Yeah, it's really cool, and it's free, and it's open source, right? So that's really cool. So if I click on Get Krita now, notice it's available for Windows, Linux, and Mac, that's the reason why I'm recommending it, right? So if I do that, Get Krita now. It says create a Windows app paid, right? You can do that one, or you can get the free one from the 64-bit installer right here. So if I click this one, that's the one you want. I'm just going to download that to my downloads with a list of the other downloads that I have. I'm installing this with you even though I have it already, just that way we're doing it together. So download Krita. Krita is a free tool we can use for production of graphics and so on. I also use another tool. I typically use Adobe Fireworks. I'm going to bring that up for a second, and I'm going to wait till Krita loads. And we'll do something similar with this one. So this is my tool of choice. Now, in order for you to use Adobe Fireworks, why Fireworks, not Photoshop? Fireworks is like Photoshop Lite in some ways. It's an older tool. If you notice, it says Adobe Fireworks CS6. It is still included in the Adobe CC suite, so Creative Cloud. You have to be a member of Creative Cloud. You can do that as a student for, I believe, $29.95 a month, which I do. Right. So if I click New, I can create any kind of document. The document could be as whatever length I want here. I'll do the same thing in Krita in a second. So let's say I make the document. I want to make my logo, and I want to make it like, let's say, I don't know, 200 by 200. Just making this up here. Notice there's some options here for canvas color, white or transparent. I'm going to choose transparent. And so I have this, let's say, square logo that I want to make. And let's say for you guys, for logo, all I'm looking for is even some basic shapes. Like you can literally, grab a shape like, let's say, some kind of polygon. Some people, hexagons are really popular these days, right? So let's make see if I can do this again. So I want to make a polygon, let's say some kind of, polygon like this. You can also change go back here. A lot of times you can change the number of sides. I've chosen this one, so it's like some kind of pentagon, right? Obviously it's black, so it's pretty ugly, right? And you know what? We can use the pentagon to almost make a Superman shield, right? If I flip it. So again, you can do things like flipping this around and whatever, rotating it. And let me just do that now. So let's rotate this around. There we go. Now, you don't have to be, that didn't exactly go as planned. You don't have to be an artist for this. Some people always argue with me and they say, Tom, I'm not an artist. And like I told you guys in the beginning of class, I'm not going to accept that because all of you have access to tools nowadays that were never available before, right? So it's not like you can't, use tools as a technical artist and, to create something that's interesting, decent, to produce something. So let's say I'm using this really weird pentagon as my as my backdrop, and I want to, use some text. So there's a text tool, and here I can just put in my, I don't know, my crazy initial T, right? So I want to make this is my logo, let's say. It almost looks like pi, right? Sure. And I don't know, I'm making this up. It's not exactly the most exciting logo, but what the heck? This is all I want from you guys. Like, I really literally want as simple as you want it to make it. Like, you can make it something like this. Or if you want to make it way more interesting than this, all the power to you. You can make it so that's more interesting than this. Hopefully you will make it more interesting than this. That's all. I'm not looking for something too complex. This is enough. TT is my logo with some kind of really weird shape. Done. And now I can export it. I can say file, right? And let's save it as, I'll do it in Krita in a second. If I save it as, you can see that I have options. I want to save it typically as a file, typically as JPEG or a PNG file. PNG I recommend because you can have that transparency. Otherwise, JPEG you'll have white around the angles here. So let's call this my logo 1. We'll make another one. Logo 1. There's my logo 1 ping, and I'll put this on my desktop so I can get it and save. So that's my first logo. I noticed if you don't use a PNG, then this part, which is transparent, won't be transparent. It'll be white or black or whatever you decide to make it, right? Which is bad. This way it'll be transparent, so you'll see this shape clearly, right?
You're using it from the club.
Which?
This Fireworks?
No, this is something I've downloaded. It's an actual app that you download with Adobe CC. And again, you can use Photoshop or Krita or whatever you want. So I'm going to save this. And if I go here, I got Krita downloaded. Let's install Krita now. So I finally got Krita downloaded. Didn't want you guys to wait for this while I was doing my logo, which is really stupidly easy. So I'm going to accept the license agreement, and it's going to go to Krita x64. Sure, shell integration, no problem. I'm just going to literally accepting everything. It's going to go to Krita. I already had this. It says create a desktop icon. Sure, I can always erase that later. And then install, right? And then when it does, it's a pretty good program. It's very Photoshop-like. So if you're used to Photoshop things like blending modes and everything else, Krita is a tool for you. Because again, you may not have access to Photoshop because you don't subscribe to Adobe CC, right? And that's why I recommend it. The other one that's also big, people use it a lot in the community from an open source perspective, is GIMP. I'm going to talk about that in a second. GIMP is a little more difficult to use, I find. But let me just go there. So if I look at GIMP, so the new image manipulation program, that's another one. I'm going to put this up. So this is another program if you want to choose to use this one. It's also good enough to do what you're doing. I'm going to put this as an alternate, right? GIMP, very popular tool. A little bit from a learning curve perspective, it's a little different than Krita, I would say, in terms of how easy it is to use. All right, so let's look at Krita for a second. So I want to make the same kind of logo idea with Krita. Here it is. They provided me a little icon on my desktop. I'll double click that. And again, I already had this, so it just replaced what I already had, which is totally fine. This is a 64-bit version, and you can notice that it asks you, do you want to see this stuff all the time? As an example, like links for the Krita website and stuff and the source code. Krita website has lots of documentation as well. There's a whole manual that you can look at. I don't care to look at that right now. So just like Fireworks, the really cool thing about Krita is you can just go File, New. You guys can do this with me now if you downloaded Krita. And there are some defaults, comic templates, design templates, texture templates, a bunch of different templates. Let's just use a custom document. And again, what I want to do is make a document that's like around, I don't know, 200 by 200, not too big. Resolution, you can choose. For web, it's good enough to do like 72 dpi. Doesn't need to be that crazy, right? And I've noticed that you can also choose some other predefined, kind of like document sizes and pixels per inch. That's what PPI stands for, pixels per inch, right? And it says the model RGB alpha, which is what you want for sure. There's 8-bit integer Chrome, and you can look at the color space browser. I leave all this the same. I don't really touch any of this. And then it's save as, and we'll call it logo 2. By the way, this is a I don't know, we'll call this logo template. You can see this is a template. You can see the template. I'm not going to do that right now. I'm just going to leave it as is, and then click create. So what this does, it makes this little tiny image. This is how big it is. It's actually 200 by 200, but it's really, really big. And notice now that the one difference between this one is that there's 2 layers. There's this one here, layer 1 and layer 2, right on the right-hand side, right? So if I want to delete my layer, I can do that because I want to remove this layer. And I want to see this. See this little background right here? This shows me that there is this transparency layer, which is kind of similar to what I did with Fireworks. So there's 2 layers on the right-hand side. I just deleted one. And now if I want to add something else in there, like let's say, for example, there's a rectangle, there's a Polygon Tool. Sure. And the Polygon Tool is different. It's like you draw the polygon, right? That's kind of weird, right? So undo that. And by the way, you see that the size is right here and the opacity is up at the top. So here I can reduce the size. So I'm not going to make it so it's too crazy. The size, this is the size of my pen. That's what this is. And if you have a pen and tablet, like I can actually physically type that in there. So if I say, I want my thing to be like 2 pixels, right? So I can kind of type that in there, 2 pixels wide. And again, I can choose this. Let's just make it a circle this time around just to make it different because it doesn't have the same tools. So again, I want to make it so that it is, I'm pressing the shift key here to make it perfectly circular. Right there it is. And now one thing to note is with Krita is once it's on there, it's not like I can grab this object anymore, right? So here's my layer, right? And notice that I can't grab this object and move it around, right? Because now that I've drawn this thing, it is where it is. So there's some disadvantages to it. It's not like it's an object that I can move around like Photoshop or whatever. So again, it's a free tool, right? If I undo this, and let's go back to that. It doesn't allow you the same support, but take a look at these. These are like grids, right? So again, you can use kind of the same idea here. So if I look at this as a grid, or this is a grid, right here. And if I start my left kind of corner there and press shift to make it more circular. And if I look at making it exactly, this is the right size, so go down to here, it'll be completely centered. There we go. That's centered down. And that's one thing. Now, the other thing is that there is no fill. All right. So it's just a circle that I've drawn, right? And the reason for this is because of the way Krita does stuff that's a little different. So up here, if you look at it, that's the opacity. And so it takes a little bit more effort, right? But you can always change the fill to whatever you want, right? So notice that on the right, there's some brush presets, like a background gradient rectangle. If I did one of those, right, I can make as many of these circles as I want, no problem. So as a drawing tool, this is kind of really cool, right? But if you wanted to look and see, some other things I can do, on the top left, it says, let's edit the brush settings, right? So it tells you the size, the ratio, all this other stuff, the angle that you're doing things and everything else. I can darken or lighten. There's also different blending modes, right, for the brushes and the opacity and the flow. So what kind of flow do I have? And flow is like how much is going to come out at the same time. I can change all kinds of lovely things. And if you notice, that is like a lot of stuff, right? It's like totally a lot of stuff to, to draw. So I'm saying to keep track of, right? And you may not need all this stuff because aren't artists, but there's some really cool stuff here. So again, notice like basic 5 size and all this kind of stuff. And if I just step away from it, it'll erase that. If I hit down here, it says gradient tool. And there's also this other thing called fill tool, which is what I want, right? So here's the fill tool. And notice my fill color right now is not, there's no fill color, right? So I want to change the color because right now if I click this, it's going to be black, right? And notice also, if you zoom in here, that there's an area that it's anti-aliasing how this thing looks on this part right here, because what I've done is when I made it when I made my, I made this actually, I changed my gradient. Instead of it being black, I changed it to gradient. That's why it looks like this. Okay, let me just undo that change. So again, if I go back to my brush. So this is my freehand brush tool. It's my line tool. And if I go back to my circle tool just for a second, one thing to note is what the color, the default color that you want is, right? And notice in here, there's no default color that's been selected, right? But on the right, it says there's advanced color selection. So what I can do is I can select a specific color. So if I want to make my brush completely black, I can do that, right? So there's my brush being black. And let's go back and draw it again. So again, I'm going to just zoom in here. And again, use this background as a grid, right? That's all I'm doing. So I'm just going to make it so that the background is exactly the same. So again, I'm pressing Shift. Sorry. First I click, and then I press Shift to make it perfectly circular. And I want to make it as even as possible, let's say. So I'm kind of doing one of those. Again, I'm just using that as a grid. There we go. So that's perfectly black now. Okay. Now the problem with it is also it's got anti-aliasing over here. That's what's happening. So when I go to this, and if I click it, you're going to see this thing right here, right? Because it's trying to fill in the circle, right? That's what it's trying to do. Okay. I guess why I like Fireworks. Fireworks is a all-in-one tool. You're good and gone, right?
Fireworks gives smooth results.
Same results, but it just takes longer to do it with Krita because it's open source, right? That's all it is. And so you have to learn how to do it a little differently. And like, it's not my tool of choice. You can also do other things, right? You can rotate this thing. Notice what I'm doing. I'm pressing Shift and my middle mouse button to rotate this around, which is kind of cool. Right? So what this does, it doesn't actually rotate anything. It rotates it for me for drawing, right? That's what it does. So again, what I can do is if I want to rotate this again, all I'm doing is if I press the Control key and my middle mouse button, right, then I can zoom in and out, right? It's kind of a cool thing. Press the Shift key, my middle mouse button, I can rotate my thing around so I can see it. So kind of a really cool thing to look at, right? And you can see the rotation percentage or whatever the angle of rotation is on the left. But again, it's not rotating it. It's just so I can see the object, right? There it is. And I can zoom in by scrolling in and out with my mouse. Very, very intuitive. And then if I want to type in something in there, like a text tool, I can do the same kind of idea. If I don't like black, I can change the background color. So again, if I go here and change the background color to blue, and if I kind of go in there, I can change that background color, right? No problem. So there's my circle. Maybe if I don't like that blue, I think that blue is kind of ugly, I can go and do it again, right? No problem. And then from there, I can go and grab that the text tool. And now the text tool is funny in that, so here's my text tool, right? And here's my layer. Now notice that in Fireworks, right, it says SVG text, right? I can go ahead and type stuff in, right? But when this tool here, if I click anywhere, it doesn't allow me to, that's really cool. It doesn't allow me to type text in here. If it's actually, what it is I have to draw an area of text first and then start typing my text. So for example, let's say I'm going to type in my two names. So this is the font type. So you can choose whatever font you like. Let's use, I don't know, Algerian, just to make it different. And let's make it so that it's TT, just to make it a weird font. And when I do that and close, it's there. And again, one thing to note is normally I wouldn't be able to move it, but I can move this one because it's a text object. It's an SVG object. I can, if I try to make this a little bit larger or whatever, no go, right? So just like before, it's not the same as what you think it is, right? Okay. Because it's a different kind of tool than what we're used to. So I can't really scale it out this way. And notice the layers. It actually created another layer. There's a vector layer that it created down here, right? And it's there's also a layer up here. And this layer, if you notice, is where the circle is. There's a circle layer where I can't access the text. And this layer, the vector layer, is where the text is, where I can move it around. So there's 2 layers, and you have to click those 2 layers in order for that to work. Now that's pretty small. And if I double click in there, and it's all right. Click away. Yeah, so if I double click in there, it gives me control. But the problem is that when I try and type something in like before, not the best tool, right? So let's just get rid of that and try it again. So I'm in my SVG layer. And again, I'm going to go in there and kind of draw an area that I want my object to be in. And notice that my text is 8. That's pretty small. Let's make it like 20 this time around. We'll choose again some kind of, we'll use this one this time. And go back with TT. And now that's a little still too small. I don't like how small it is. I like bigger text, right? Because that's just the way it is. That's circle. That's not how big it is. So you can see, like, it's not as intuitive, let's say. But all the tools that you can do, everything that you can do in Fireworks or whatever you can do here, it's just that it takes a little bit more effort. Because, again, it's open source, and we have to figure out how to do everything in here that we normally would do. You normally would do somewhere in Fireworks or Photoshop, right? So that's the difference. Okay, that's pretty small. And let me try one more time, and then I'll give up and go do something else in a second, because I have other things to talk to you about today that are they're hugely important, crazy important. So again, I want to make it so that it's like, let's do this. So we'll go GT, change this to 20. Maybe make it 30 or something like that, or 36. There we go. Even that's pretty small. Let's make it even bigger than that. I think maybe 72. Yeah, that's about right. And let's change that size to, I don't know. Okay, even better. Save. Beautiful. Now it's too big, but that's okay, because at least it's bigger. Bigger is better for me then, and I can play with that a little bit. So again, what I want to do is let's make it overlay the circle, and I can nudge it with my arrow keys a little bit, right? So again, it doesn't look like it's centered because of how small it is, right? Because remember, this is 200 by 200, right? So again, I can't do this with it because it's a SVG object. That's what it is. That's probably as close as I can get it. It's not perfectly centered, but what I can do is I can change the fill type again, right? So right now it's black, right? And that's my default text size. And I can change this to whatever I want, like white. For now, I'm going to accept this though and see what it looks like. So File, Save As. It's not the most beautiful logo, but what the heck? Again, you can see that I just got more control with the other one. That's all it is. And I want to save this. Now notice when I save as, I'm going to give it a name logo2.png, and I want to definitely change it to a PNG type, right? And notice there's like a lot of different types you can choose from, right? But the one I want is PNG, this one, right? And again, because it preserves the transparency around this object, right? As opposed to everything else. And it tells you, warning, saving as an image PNG will lose information from your image. Yeah, sure, I don't mind about that. Also save your image as a Krita file. No, that's done. And now if you notice, I've got both images here. So somewhere on my desktop, I'm going to have both of those files, right? And if I don't, I can always resave them. That's the beautiful thing. One thing I have to do sometimes is refresh my desktop, because my desktop is kind of an active desktop that I'm using. And where the heck did I store it? I just want to make sure I get the images fine. Otherwise, I'll be angry. I get angry when I don't get my results. I'm like, no, why don't I have my results, right? Where? There's this. All right, this logo is no problem, but the other one, let's try it again. File, save as. Oh, it's on downloads. Yeah, let's put it on desktop. Yeah. And yeah, there it is. So there's the two. So there's the two logos I made. One is kind of weird. The other one's kind of better, right? Fireworks, Krita, right? This one. So, I mean, that was just quick that I did that, right? Because Fireworks has some presets that I like. That's why I use Fireworks a lot. Same as using Krita. Same fire. Well, you have to, if you don't know either one, you might as well use the free, learn the free one, because it's easier to learn. So I've got these two things, and I want to include both of those things in my project now, right? So I'm going to cut them. I'm going to go into my lesson. Inside assets, I have an empty folder, but I want to put them into a subfolder. So I'm going to go into new folder. I'm going to call this images, right? And inside my images folder, I'm going to drop in those two assets, right? So logo 1, logo 2. Remember, when I do this locally, I also do it in my project that I was working on last day. So if I look here on my project, and if I look inside my assets folder, it's green for me, and it indicates that there's 2 new objects. And I can actually look at them here, right? So here I can look at them, right? You can see the two different objects. One is not as exactly perfect. Not happy with that one, but this one is not bad. And I want to use this one. And by the way, I'll put these up on GitHub for you guys in a bit as well. So I want to use this logo, and I want to put it on my nav bar, right? Now it's pretty darn big, right? It's pretty big. So remember, when I include this as a logo, right, in my nav bar, how do I do it? Well, the great thing is, if you go to Get Bootstrap, and if you look at the documentation for Get Bootstrap, under components, there is a navbar component that we've been working with. And it gives you a basic navbar. And if you notice, there's this navbar-brand. And in the navbar brand, they have this word navbar. Well, this is where we want to put our logo in here. Our navbar, where we want to replace the word navbar with our brand, our actual logo. Okay? And we need to put some CSS around it because, and here it goes, here's the navbar brand. Because when we put in a brand, right, and here's an example of this, by the way. Notice that it says, here's an anchor tag, and they've got a couple of different examples here. And this is the one we want, this example right here. We have an image, and notice it has a width and height. I don't really like this all that much because it's like inline inline style in some way. But for us, this is exactly what we're looking for. Image, source, whatever the source is, with a width and a height, and it goes right inside where it says navbar brand, right? We made our 200 by 200. If I make mine 30 by 30, guess what? It's going to be that's why I made it square. So it's going to be proportional. It's going to be right in there. It's going to fit right inside my navbar. That's what I'm looking for. And if I want to make it bigger, I can make it bigger. We'll try different things out. Okay. So again, inside my navbar, let's try it in my index page. So in my index page, right, I have access to this now, and it's right inside my navbar. So here's my navbar brand, and notice I have COMP125. I want to get rid of this, right? And what I want to do is give it a space in here, and then put in an image. So I want to put image, right? And I know that I also need source, right? So here's my source, and I know that it's in assets, right? Images, and I want to pick logo 1, right? How did I do that? Logo 1. And then underneath that, I want to put 2 attributes. One is width, right? Where I can specify a width of, we'll use 30 like they said, and I can also specify a height if I want, although I probably don't need to. All right, so width 30 by 30, and if I update it, this is only on my, so far only on my index page. Let's check it out on my index page. So I'm going to go to my localhost. Here it is. Notice that there it is, right? There's my little logo. And now because it's transparent, you can't see any of the white or anything behind it. It's pretty good, right? My little logo, it's very simple, not exciting, but it does the job. And for you guys, that's all I'm looking for. It could be this if you really want to. It's not the most exciting logo, but now if I made it bigger, what if I made it really big? So I said I want to make it 50 by 50. How does that look, right? And you can see that might look even nicer, right? So here's my logo and whatever. Let's replace the logo with logo 2 and see the difference, right? So here we go. Logo 2, not as nice. Still kind of works okay, though. At least it's something, right? So whether you do it with the other one or the other one, it doesn't matter to me. I prefer logo 1. I think that's kind of what makes more sense to me. And again, I took very little time in making this. I just need to copy this part right here into my other page because, you know, every nav bar is different. So I'm going to go into my About page. I'm going to go all the way to the top where my nav bar is from my, just like before with our brand. I'm just going to replace this part. and just drop that in there. And then now you have the exact one for both pages, right? Which is what you're looking for. Okay, so logo done. Very easy. That's all I'm looking for, guys. I don't need a crazy logo. You can be creative as much as you want. I spent 2 minutes on my logo, not even a thought went into it, right? You can spend some time figuring it out, learn a tool, whether it's Krita or whether you want to use GIMP, if you have access to Photoshop or if you have something else. One of the best logo making tools to me, and my all-time favorite, honestly, is Illustrator, right? But now there's a learning curve, right? So there's a lot of stuff to do. Why is Illustrator great for tools? And I'll just give you 2 seconds with Illustrator. Illustrator allows complete control, all right? So where you have stuff with Photoshop and Fireworks, Fireworks is cool. It's a very lean way of doing stuff. But my friends, Illustrator is the tool for logo making, right? And also for any other thing that you want to make, any kind of shapes or whatever. So I want to make a new object here. You can see that I can make a common object, a custom object that's 64 by 64, or I can just make it here. I can go over here like I did before. So let's just use 200 by 200. So this is Illustrator. Again, you have to have a license for this, which I do, right? So notice that it says here artboards. It's a very powerful feature because what I can have is multiple areas, artboards that I can combine to do really, really cool special effects. If I click create, it creates my new artboard. Even though it says, now some part of it is a little bit differently intuitive than the other one. Notice the same kind of toolbar set that we're normally used to. On the left-hand side, I have options to do a bunch of different things. Here's my Polygon tool, like before, right? So very similar to what I did with Fireworks, right? And again, when I use my Polygon, I can get any kind of shapes I want. So in this case, it's a hex as opposed to another kind of shape. But take a look at the control that I have here. I have complete control over where this goes, right? So, and I can also reshape it by literally pressing these little handles and just reshaping it the way I want, right? Why? Because it is a vector graphic. That's the beautiful thing about it, right? And notice my background here. I have a background that is white, but there is no background here. This is not a background. This, my friends, right, is actually just a document background. So it gives us the idea of this is where I'm drawing. But there is no physical background. The background is actually transparent. So even though it shows white, it's just for your comfort. That's what it is, right? I can also do things like turn on my rulers, right, which is really cool. I can show rulers and grids. I can change my the size of my grid. I can change it from pixels to points, from points to inches, to whatever you want. The great thing about this is notice how I get like on the right-hand side here, I get a little pop-up that tells me the width and height in pixels. I can do that, right? I can see the width and height in pixels on the right-hand side where it's 146 by 168, right? Exactly. And I can center everything. I can align everything, to center and all that kind of stuff. It's amazing the control you have. But again, when it comes to alignment, right, when it comes to that kind of stuff, it's amazing. But it also is not free. So that's why, I like it. Yeah, I like it. It's fantastic, but it's also not free. And that's why I don't recommend this is your primary tool. Notice that the background here is white. I can change the background to whatever I want. This is my hexagon. I can change this by double clicking, and then I can, choose whatever background I want. Let's go with another blue tone. All right, something like this. I don't know. Not really happy with any of those blues. Let's go to this blue. Yeah, that's a little better. It's a little bit brighter blue. Right, so there we go. Nice and simple. I can layer on top of that any kind of text I want. So we can, type in PT again. And it's an object, right? So again, I can use this as whatever object I want. I can resize it like you normally would think of. I can change the background immediately to what I want. So again, really nice and easy for Illustrator, right? And notice that I can do all kinds of special effects with this thing, like you wouldn't believe. Right, and again, I want to center this. I go, back to alignments, right? So, click on this thing. I can align it to whatever I want. Here's my align tool, I can center it, and I can align it in the middle so it's exactly centered. And if it's too much, if it's not right, I can always nudge it pixel by pixel, right? Precision with wherever I want it to be, right? So kind of cool from that perspective, right? And then I can save it with whatever I want. So again, just ignore this outside. I don't care about that. I can say file, save as, right? And you can see now I can choose whatever format I'd like. This isn't the right one. It's export, sorry, on Illustrator. That's right. So export, and then export as is what I want to do. And then I can choose PNG. And then I'm looking at my desktop, and let's make this logo 3. Right, so logo3.ping, right? 72 dpi, it gets that, and you can see a preview of it right here. This is what it looks like. It shears it, so it's exactly the right size. So anything that's not used, it's gone, right? And then I can press OK. And once I've done that on my desktop, I'll have another logo, right? So somewhere on my desktop. Let's refresh. Again, you know, sometimes it doesn't go where I want it to go, but that's only because I have OneDrive, and sometimes it goes into my OneDrive desktop, not my desktop. Let's try that again. So I keep these tools open before I say I'm done. And then I got to do all this again, right? File, export as, and where did it go? It should have gone to my desktop, but hey, let's just make sure it goes to the right place. So users Thomas desktop, where it should go right here. There we go. Let's try this again. Call it logo 3 and press say export. Okay. And how about now? There it is. So then again, just like before, I'll pull this up. I'll go into my assets, images, and this time I'll just drag and drop, right? So I have this in there. There's logo 3. And if I go back in there, now I have logo 3 in assets. Sometimes what you need to do is you need to refresh. There's logo 3, right? And if, let's check this out, see how that looks. Maybe I like that more. I don't know, right? So yeah, so for me, the thing that I like about, Illustrator is this complete control. It's vector graphics, which are totally scalable, right? So I'm not really, I don't know if I kind of like the other one still better than this one, right? But let's leave it as is for now. So this is my hexagon TT, right? Instead of my other one. I think I like the other one. I like the pentagon better. Like it's almost like a shield, right? So that's just me. But we're not a logo design class. We're just a class to get this done so that you know how to do this. Okay, so I added a logo and I added a few files. Let's put this up on GitHub. So because I've been fooling around with this thing. And I think it's time that we put it up. So I'm going to go into my PowerShell here, and I'm going to say git add dot, right? Clear git commit -m. I'll say added logo images, right? Those are them. Git push origin master, which will push it up to the GitHub. Okay, and there you go. That's all done. So that's all pushed up to GitHub. We're good to go. Now let's get into the real lesson. Any other questions around logo? I showed you 3 tools: Fireworks, Krita, which I kind of like as an open source tool. I'm going to close this down for now. And Illustrator, which is the penultimate tool for logo design. Some people also use Illustrator, especially if you're a professional, to make all kinds of print. So anything you want to do, brochures, labels, stuff, whatever. So it works for print and for web. And a lot of these tools can do everything. Photoshop can do all the same stuff. Photoshop is just a much bigger learning curve, I find, than using Illustrator or Fireworks. For Photoshop is very similar to Krita, right? He uses layers for everything. Whereas Illustrator, just what you see is what you get. It's exactly perfect, but it's also expensive. All right, so
Can we use Microsoft Publisher?
you can use whatever you want. If you want to use Publisher, if you want to use different drawing programs, like Paint.net is also a nice place to go and take a look at that. There's a bunch of other, Microsoft Paint is actually getting better and better nowadays. Just a little bit more difficult to work with and takes longer. So for me, I always try and optimize my workflow. That's why I try and use the best tool. for the job. All right, so anyway, so that's that. But we're talking about arrays and for loops and all that, or loops in general, right? Again, all the loops that you see for the most part are exactly the same, but there are some differences. There is an exercise that I put up. I put up lab 3 up for you guys. It's already up on eCentennial. And in that lab, I ask you to do a couple things. I ask you to take a list, and I want you to, of your favorite things, and I want you to create the list programmatically in your About page. Now, this is a little bit more challenging. This is probably the most challenging lab that I've given you for if you're actually going to try and do it on your own. Or you can follow along and just do it with me. But we'll talk about why this is the case in a second. So first of all, let's go back to our app.js and take a look at what we've got. So far we've got this array. We fooled around with this array of, this thing here is an array of what? First of all, it's an array of objects, right? Because I have name and age. There's 2 properties here, right? So let's just simplify this, okay? Just to make it so we'll start. If I was going to print out this array, I want to show this array, and I also pushed and unshifted a couple of more objects. That's what we've done here, right? So if I was going to show the entire array just on the console, how would it look? Notice that I said console log my array, but what if I wanted to actually print everything off, right? So let's, instead of doing that, let's just do this. So you can use a for loop, right? And the thing with a for loop is I'm going to use this. So in Visual Studio Code, you can see that there's a bunch of different options here. One of them is the for loop, just this one. So for, and then you can start typing by yourself. And in a for loop, if you typed it by yourself, you would have to define a variable. And this is the control variable, right? The control variable would be some kind of index. So you could type var, typically, or in our case, let, which is the right thing to do. And let's say we'll call it index. We can initialize it to 0. And inside my for loop, we can keep typing. We can also say that where index, is less than my array dot length, right? Then index plus plus, right? This is a leftover from C++ and C, right? This is exactly what it looks like in C#, Java, all C-influenced languages look like this. Even Swift, right? The new language from Apple, right? So they're all the same when it comes to for loops. And this is good because I can kind of swim through as however length it is, and then I want to kind of console.log all these objects. And then notice that I want to look at through the my array. My array has, it's an array of objects, okay? Just to point this out to you. And I want to access the name property, right? The name property. So you would be forgiven to think that you can do something just like this. Typically, you can just do my array dot and then my name, and that's what you want, right? Okay, question, is this going to work? Well, my array name is not going to work, but what about my array index name? Is that going to work? And does it give you code hinting? Let me just check this out. So if I go dot, notice it gives me age and name. And if I go do this, then it should print out the name of each of my objects in the array. We'll simplify the array later, right? But let's just see what it does. So all I want is names. Okay, so if I save it, and if I go back here, and if I look at my inspector under console, you can see that it only works, by the way, for my About page. Let's go to my About page. And there's my names, right? Peter, Tom, blah, 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 right? That kind of does it. And every line, it kind of loops through each of the names in my array, right, with my for loop. So that's one type of loop. And that's what we've always seen before. This is nothing different than we've seen in C#, Java, name your favorite language, okay? Okay, but there's other for loops too. So here's one, and I'm going to keep this one so you can see it, but I'm going to kind of comment it out so you can see this one. This is like, loop number, we'll call this loop number 1, or loop type number 1. How about that? A for loop, classic for loop, right? And then there's another kind of for loop. Okay. You can also, by the way, you can use the code hinting in Visual Studio Code to create your for loop for you. If I press enter, it'll actually create the for loop right away, like in one step. So that's how fast that is. I mean, if you really want to create the for loop, and it was exactly what we just made. There's also something called the for each. Okay, that's kind of a more modern for loop, and it gives you the array. Now, this is a little different because you got this really weird syntax. Okay, so It asks for my array. My array is my array. This is my array, right? For each element. Now you can change this element to whatever you want, right? It's each of the objects in my thing. We'll call this element. These are people, right? That I'm. Some say for each person. For each person in my array. That's how you should read it. For each person in my array, right? Do something. And notice that there's this fat arrow here. Okay. Wow. What the heck is that? It is actually an object, right? So for each this is called fat arrow syntax. It's a modern ECMAScript 6 way of doing stuff, right? And what this does is it says, hey, do this function. Okay, there's another way of writing this, and I'll do it in a second. But if I hover over this, it kind of does this. Person is it's an object of strings, right? That's what it is. It's a string and a number. And if I go in here into this part here, this is kind of the callback function again. So I got this little callback function right here. That's what this thing is, right? So in my callback function, I could tell it to do whatever I want. Now, person is the object, so I can just console.log, right? Person.name. And that would produce the same results as this array right here. So I'm looping through each of my objects in my array, right? Each of my people in my array, and I'm outputting the name. Okay, that's another way of doing it. Okay, so this is way number 2. And if I look at it, again, same thing. No differences. So this is kind of like loop type number 2, which is like for each. This is, we'll say, modern for each loop. Where's my modern? Because you got this fat arrow syntax. But there is another way to do it. So if I go for each, and if I start typing this, I can't just do for each, right? I got to follow the syntax. So if I say my array dot for each, that's an object. And if I open it up, it tells you what is required. Okay, take a look so you can actually type it by yourself. And it's good to do it without the code hinting. Okay, so it tells you need some kind of value, right? Then, all right, that's the first thing. And then it says, it's a bunch of stuff here. A function that accepts up to 3 arguments. For each calls the callback function one time for each element in the array. So whatever that callback function is. So you can make a callback function that's inline, right? And you can make a callback function like I did before, right? So how does it work? The old way or the older way? It's still person. And then I'm going to say that's the name of my object, right, that I want. And then comma, and then some kind of anonymous function that's in here. That's what I want. For person is the type that I want for each person, right? So that's the one thing. Now, what this is actually doing, if I'm not wrong, is it does something like this, where person is a yes, where this is equivalent to this syntax up here. So if I was going to do this, I'm just going to copy and paste this. So this syntax is like this syntax. Please forgive me. I know this is weird, right? But you're going to see this, right? There's other ways of doing this, by the way, too, right? But notice that this is an anonymous function that I have in here, right? That's being called. This is called the callback function, remember? That's being called for each object in my array. That's what it's doing. And the parameter of the function is person. This is a little bit more intuitive, right? That's why the new fat arrow function takes the place of the function keyword plus the argument. That's what it is. Okay, and we'll talk about fat arrow functions later. Not now, but later on in the course. All right, but this is the equivalent. And then to show you this, exact same, right? This is the other way of doing it. But you can also have a named function in here. So for example, instead of an anonymous function, I can call some other function that I've defined already, that it'll loop through that function over and over again for as many objects that are in, for every element that's in the array. Okay, so that's the for each. So this is loop type number 3. This is for each, and this is classic. I say classic because it's the old way of doing it with ECMAScript 5 syntax, the older syntax. All right, then there's the for in loop. All right, so notice that there's for each, for in, for of, right? It's a bunch of them. We're going to do them all, right? Here's for in. So for in, it has a different syntax, okay? So for in does, for every key in the object, then what I want to do is I want to loop through that key. So if I call the key index, my object is my array, because that's what my array is. All arrays are objects in some way. Then what I want to do is the same thing. I want to do this kind of thing right here, where my console.log is person index.name. Right? That's what I want to do. Now this will not work. My array. I'll be okay. My array index.name. There we go. This will work. Okay, so this does the exact same thing, but what it does, it uses a for in syntax where my index is the index that I'm using, and it's gonna create an index for every object in the array, and it does it the exact same way. If I save it and go back here, again, same list. So there's for each, for in, and there's for of. Too. Let's talk about that one, right? There's different reasons for them. And we'll talk about those in a second. So this is type number 4, which is for in. And this is more of a modern. For in didn't really exist before. Okay, for loop. I want to go for of. Let's try that one. All right, so we have our iterator of objects. Looks like very similar to this. The only difference is that this is the iterator, whatever it is. My object is my array, right? And we're just going to put in this console log. Now this is different, okay? Because when I do this iterator, I look at the iterator first. First, let's just wipe this out for a second. Okay, so if I go index, what is index? If I hover over it, it's actually the object, right? It's actually the object. So I don't have to do index. This should be actually person, right? For every person of my array, right, what I want to do is a console log again, back to what we did up here. Right? That's what should be there, right? So again, it's indexless. This is indexless. This is using an index. This is indexless, right? This is indexless. I can go through each of I can treat my array like a list. Here I'm treating my array like an array, right? Those are the differences that you asked for. Why the differences, right? Okay, so does it work? Yeah, it sure does, right? But there's different ways, different syntax accomplishes the same thing. All right, so this is loop number 5. So again, loop type number 5 for of modern. Right, it's more modern than what we had before. All right, so kind of really cool stuff. While loops, right? One of the most common loops that we use. Notice that there, I can type it by myself, or I can get it to be typed for me. Let's get it typed for me this time around, save time. The condition, what is that condition? Okay, well, for a while loop, I need 2 things. I need the while loop structure and something called a sentinel variable, right? The sentinel variable keeps track of the index a lot of times, or some kind of condition that I can check. It almost like extracts the index up here. I can say let index equal to 0, and then inside my while loop, I can say while my index is less than my array dot length. This is something you've seen before. Then what I want to do is I want to do it this way. So I want to kind of say my array da 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 da, and that's it. It'll break out, and that'll do the exact same thing. Whoa. Oh yeah, I got to increase the index. Index plus. I also have to increase. I have to do my iterator. Here's my iterator, right? So there we go. And now plus index. Index is. Did I do it wrong? Sometimes we do, right? Yeah. So where my index is less than my array dot length, which is it should. Array length is right now a certain number. And if I save it, why is it doing Peter a bunch of times here? Browser sync connected 5,000 times. An endless loop. Why is this an endless loop? So it's going to go through my array index, and then it's going to go back. So let's read this the way it works. So my while loop says, let index equal to 0. Okay, and let's just look at the index, console.log. Again, when we troubleshoot, a lot of times I can use my console log. I want to print out my index. What is my index? Okay. So while my index is less than array length. Okay, so cool. Where's my index? How come it's not? Like I'm not connected to my browser anymore. Yeah, see, it's cycling. I killed my browser. Completely killed my browser. Okay, let's just like lock it down. Yeah, I'm still broadcasting. That's good. Woohoo. That would be bad. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to broadcast me, because right now it's recording me. I want to record my background screen somehow. I don't know how that happened, but hey, whatever. Hopefully it didn't mess up my recording. If it did, it did. Hopefully you guys are here. Yeah, but this stuff is all messed up, if you notice, right? So I'm going to kind of go back into my, instead of me going Control Alt Delete, actually maybe I should do that, Control Alt, but then I'll kill my whole browser session.
The live recording is all still there, and it recorded the screen.
Still going?
Yeah.
Yay. Okay, good. So let's just stop this thing. Let's go back to Node. And it says reloading browsers. I'm going to kind of terminate this thing. Hopefully that will stop me from having this weird error. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to redo this thing. I'm going to go light-server, and hopefully that'll repopulate this. This is what I wanted. So this is in browser sync, but the other ones aren't. And if I go look at inspect and go to console, and if I go to about, yeah, so this is what's happening. That's why it messed up. So it actually was working, but my browser was messed up. That's what was happening. I was like, wait, how did I mess that up? Right? I didn't. Right? So it just, sometimes it happens. I mean, it is the web, right? I mean, you're testing with web tools. You're not testing with C# or Java, right? And that's why sometimes people really, really hate, you know, the web, because they're like, hey, how come it's not working? Well, it's because it's the web. So this is loop number 5, loop number 6, let's say. Loop number 6. Why am I going through all these loop types? Because every one of them have different purposes. Loop number 6, and this is the while loop. This is classic, because this has been around forever, right? There's also the do while loop, right? Which I'm not going to cover. Why? We never use it. Never. So what's the difference between a while loop and a do while loop for those developers out there? 2 seconds. You should tell me what's the difference. I do the checks, which means, so what happens with, so why would I use the do while as opposed to the while loop ever? There it is. So maybe you were going to answer the same thing, but basically what it is the do while loop happens every single time once, at least once, right? Where the while loop may never happen, right? Because the check happens at the top of a while loop, the do while loop happens at the bottom. So you always do at least one iteration with the do while. Never use it. I always use for loop or while loop for the most part. A while loop is great when you want something you want to break out of. If I want to make a game loop, I use a while loop, right? Because while loop can go on until I decide to exit my game, whereas a for loop is a fixed number of iterations, right? I'm going to go through some fixed number of iterations until I'm done, right? The while loop can go on for a lot longer. Okay, so that's the difference in loops, loop types. And then we also want to talk about the difference in statements. If statements, you know, if else, this exact same syntax. I'm not going to go into that. But I do want to talk about one of the conditional statements that you will see that is the least understood, which is the ternary operator, right? Have you guys learned about the ternary operator, hopefully in C#? Some people are shaking their heads. I better talk about it. It's really good to use the ternary operator when you have an if-else. So here's the typical thing. So if, as an example, my array.length, right, is greater than 0, then let's make a variable like let's array full array. No, sorry. How about array not empty? Array not empty. I'm making this random thing. Array not empty is equal to false, right? Actually, well, how about we say array empty? Array empty, not array not empty. Array empty is equal to true. Okay, so we'll start off as true. Okay. And then we'll say, well, if my array.length is greater than 0, then we can always say that array empty, right, is equal to false, right? Because it's not, the array length is greater than 0, right? Does that make sense? Array empty, false. Okay. But sometimes I want to check if both are true. So I can say, well, then what about else? Here's the conditions. Array empty, right, is equal to true somehow, right? It's the same thing. I'm using like, let me see how many lines of code here. So I have to declare the array. And if I didn't know what it was, I can make it undeclared. I can say, well, I don't know what it is. It's Boolean right now. It's any. But if my array length is greater than 0, then do this. Otherwise, do this. So I'm using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If I compress the lines, it'd be less, but 6 lines of code to do like an if-else. And it's just 2 conditions. It's either this or this. This is a perfect case for the ternary operator. Okay, so this is one way of doing it, right? Longhand. Now, if you're not used to it, the other way looks like this. Let me just comment this out. This is like an if-else toggle. That's what this is, right? Okay, either one or the other. All right, but the other way to do it is do something like this. Well, I could say array empty is equal to, bring this up so you can see it. Here's the condition where my array dot length is greater than 0, right? Well, if my array dot length is equal to 0, then, right, I want to have it as true or false, right? Else true. One line of code. Right? So how the hell do you read this then? Because it's really confusing for some people, right? So what you're saying is that my array.length is greater than 0. That's the condition. So if this condition is true, then do everything that comes after the question mark. So false. Take this false and assign it to array empty, right? Else, if this condition is false, then take whatever's after the colon, right? Whatever's after the colon, which is true, and assign it to array empty. That's what it does. Okay? So that's kind of the ternary operator. Okay, so that's something that I wanted to show you. That's not included typically in most people's way of learning. You should have known this from C# or Java or whatever language. But if this is a valid in a much quicker way, actually the machine likes this way of doing things because it thinks this way, right? When it comes to branching. This is another form of branching. Whenever we do if else, we're creating branching statements where we have 2 potential different lines of code that's going to come in depending on the condition, whatever the condition is. Sorry, that? No, this won't work with multiple conditions, only with one. Actually, you can put in multiple conditions in here in one big statement, but you can only assign one value, right? That's all I can do, right? But the great thing about JavaScript is you can put in a function in here, right? So I can call a function that returns a value and another function that returns another value, right? So you can do that here too, okay? So that's really cool stuff in here. You can sub in these falses and trues or whatever the value is. For example, if I wanted to make sure that, if I hover over or hover out and I wanted to change the opacity, I could change the opacity depending on whether it's hovering over or hovering out. And I could change that because my condition itself would be a true false. I could check for that. It's more complex code, but I could totally do that. And then I can have one event listener to do all that stuff. We're not going to go into that right now. But this is called the ternary operator. So ternary operator. It's an alternate toggle conditional statement. And very useful because it takes one line of code, right? So I can include this as an example instead of like, I don't know, 5, 6 lines, right? Less lines of code, faster execution. Okay, that's just the way it works. And the other thing that we also see in JavaScript, which is different than other languages, is exactly equals to. So we have equals to, right? So here's my if, you know, my array, say 0.name is equal to Tom, right? So here's where we have my array equal to. So here's my name, my array name, Tom, which is true, right? If my array 0 name is equal to Tom, then, as an example, do something, console.log. First element is Tom, right? That's the equals, the condition equal, right? And what about this? So why isn't it coming up? So because I went down here, I said array empty, my array, look, my array dot name. My array 0.name is equal to Tom, right? Is it? What is my array 0? Right? So my array name 0. So again, if I was to try this out, so console log my array 0, you can see that I'm getting the same problem as before. Huh? Sorry, just want to make sure that I'm having the same problem as before. My funky array, why isn't it running? Let array type. Probably having the same problem as before. Sorry, I have a bit of a problem. And I don't want to stop because it'll kill my recording. And that's the problem. So I can normally what I would do is I would just stop this, but I'll just make it again. Let's make another tab because this tab won't kill. So perfectly fine with me. Oh, it's still not working. Why is that? So it's showing nothing. My array, it's showing my array itself. So here's my about page. Here's my about content. Here's my array. And then dot name. I didn't change this in here, my array length, right? So that's what I've done. And then I'm looking at my array dot length is greater than 0 for this condition. So it didn't error out on this condition at all, where array empty is whatever. And then I said my array 0 dot name is equal to Tom, then do this. So it's actually not this. And just to show you this, it didn't error out, actually, it was correct. But somehow, let's put it outside here to see if that condition doesn't come true. Peter, that's why. How's that possible? Oh, because we unshifted it. All right, we'll say Peter. So it's correct, actually. Okay, that's a good thing. So we'll say Peter. There we go. Peter. Then we'll say first element is Peter. Okay, good. So that we can do that normally. But what if I want to check if my age, right? If my age is equal to, look in brackets, look in quotations. If my age is 25, is it 25? Let's see if Peter's age is 25. Well, wait a minute. I'm going to show you. This is what I'm trying to tell you. I'm putting in quotations 25. Will that work? You're wrong. Because it's JavaScript, right? And so it looks at 25 and it takes the 25 in quotation marks and goes, wait a minute. 25 looks like a number. Age is a number. Probably is what the guy means. Yeah. This is wrong, guys. It'll cause you an error. So what we want to use is something called exactly equals, which is the triple equals, which is totally different than, it does not exist in Java or C#. Right now there's none of that. Right, it doesn't come out. Right, because exactly equals checks the value and the type, both value and type, whereas equals only checks the values, doesn't care about the type, which is crazy. It makes it crazy in JavaScript, right? Why isn't it working? Because equal only checks type, value, not type, right? So if I want to say that if my age is exactly equal to 25, so now I'm checking to see if it's the literal 25, the number 25, right? Okay, that's possible as well. Now it'll work again, right? The first element is Peter because it's exactly equal to 25. Okay, does that make sense? Type and value. And there's three of these, right? There's equal, three equals. There's equal, greater than. So you can use the same thing, greater than or equal to. Sorry, greater than or equal. Less than or equal, right? Not equal, right? So just to see if you see those kinds of things, exactly equal, that's one of the weird things around JavaScript. Okay, equal means exactly equal. All right. Questions around that? That's kind of confusing sometimes, right? But take a look at that. That's a different set of operators that you don't have in other languages. Okay. All right. So that's kind of finicky stuff. So this is again, it's a note for you guys. Equal checks both value and type, where equal only checks value. Okay, that's important to understand the difference between one and the other. Okay. One more thing about arrays before we get into your exercise. So I want you to spend some time doing your exercise today because I want to talk about it. It's more complex, and I want to actually show you how to do part of it. Right. You can also use arrays as associative arrays. I'm afraid to tell you how to do this, and you're going to be mad at me again because you're going to say, Tom, what the heck is this? Right? So we'll make a new array. Let my associative array, big name, right? I'm going to make it equal to a new array, right? So you can do it this way, or you can do it this way. Either one is correct, same thing, right? So first I create the array container, right? I need to create the array container. And in my associative array, right, now I say something like this. My associative array name, I can do this, right, is equal to Tom. My associative array age is equal to 30. Not true. My associative array, you know, some other thing, I don't know, student number, right? Let's say student num, not student number, is equal to, you know, P008490, whatever. There's a reason for all this stuff. So what the heck is this thing, right? What am I doing? It's like key value pairs. That's what it is. So it even does that. That's how flexible arrays are in JavaScript. It's so flexible, it's like giving you a rope that you can hang yourself with. How about that, right? And that's the problem with JavaScript. JavaScript is the most flexible language you can possibly use, but so flexible you'll kill yourself, right? You'll do the splits with JavaScript, right? If I do my associative array, right, dot, and you can see that if I go name, right, that is kind of a legal thing, right? I can say, I want to look at my name. So let's take a look at, first of all, what my associative array gives me. So if I do console.log and I put in my associative array, okay, and let's see what I get with this thing, right? So if I go back, I see that I get this. It looks like an object again. So whereas I have age is 30, name is Tom, and student number is whatever this is. Length is 0. Why is length 0? It's not an array anymore. That's the weird thing about this thing, right? It's an array that has properties. It's not an object. And you can't index it anymore. I can't run through, I can't loop through this thing. I can't go for each or do any of this. Because why? Because my iterator tells me that my length is 0, right? However, it's great when I want to use something like this. Game objects, in brackets, player is equal to my player. Game objects enemy is equal to enemy. And I can hold a bunch of my game objects or some random objects inside of some kind of associative array that I can call by the name that I want, whatever name I create. In the example, Tom or player or enemy or whatever, right? So how do you use it? So can I do console.log my associative array? And then dot name. Can I do that? Because it says no, right? You can see that I'm getting a weird thing that says any. It doesn't know what that is, right? It does. Works. My associative array name is Tom, right? But I can also do, how about this? My associative array name. That also works. Yeah, so what it does is it's almost like a container where I can contain a bunch of stuff and I can name them with my own custom names. Think of it that way. That's why it's associative. It associates any name that you provide, any key, string key, with any value. But there's no looping. You can't loop through this thing. You can't sit there and go, like, for every element in the array, loop. It doesn't give you a count. But what it does do is if I want to do a for each, I believe for each or for n, one of them works. So if I do for each, and if I go my associative array, right? Here's my associative array. So for each element in my associative array, because it's a different kind of array, let's just call this, we'll leave it at elements, console.log, element, nada. Can't loop through any of them, right? There's no loop, there's no iterator, right? Doesn't work. And let's try the for in. So for in and the for of to show you the difference. So this is the constant key. Now this might work. Key gives you the key. So key would be for every key, but then there's no key. I don't have a key for this thing, right? There is no key. There's no index. So I can't use index 0, index 1, index 2. There's no index. It doesn't exist. So this wouldn't work. Okay, how about for of? Same problem with for each. For of, here's my iterator. There is no iterator, right? So if I was to do something like, I don't know, element of my associative array, right? And if I want to do a console log of elements, oh, capital E. Actually, I should make this lowercase just because it'll cause issues. The element is a reserved word. All right, so what does it give me now? Nothing. Can't loop through it. No iterator. But it holds a bunch of names, right? It holds a bunch of data, but I can't get to it using an iterator. I can only get to it using the associative name I've given it, right? Or use it as a property as if it's an object. Okay? It's out there. So if you ever see it, don't be afraid of it. That's why I'm introducing it to you. So you're like, hey, Tom never talked about associative arrays. Yeah, it's JavaScript's dirty little secret. We don't want to look at, I don't want you to know about associative arrays because they're like, it's an ugly thing, right? But there's some really cool uses to it when it comes to objects. When we create classes and objects, that's when we use associative arrays. We don't use them now. But I'm bringing it up because we're talking about arrays and data today. All right, so that's all this stuff. So this is my associative array, and I'll put in some things. So associative arrays create this key / value pair association. But there's no iterator. Means can't loop through them. Okay? No way, no possibility, because there's a length of 0. Unless you somehow know the length of your associative array by yourself, you figure that out. That's the only way you can loop through them, right? And then you still wouldn't. You have to know the actual, the conditions. The stuff we've covered so far. So my associative, we've covered associative arrays. We've covered the ternary operator, right, which looks like this. We've covered the exactly equals to, right? That's what this thing is. It's a funny way of thinking about it, right? This is the other way. I can probably kill this part. And we've also covered a bunch of different kinds of looping options, right? And now I want to do this, let me see if I can bring up another window because my Google Chrome is damaged, right? I'm going to go to Bicentennial and sign in. So I've posted another exercise, lab 3. Some of you aren't doing the labs. I noticed that there's some people who are not submitting. You know, it's 1% every time, right? So if you haven't submitted lab 1 or 2, I'm probably going to post 12 labs, probably, which means it'll give you a chance to have a couple of extra points, like bonus points for the other labs. If you don't do 2 of them, you'll be okay. But you should do them because they're going to equate to about 10% of your final grade. So if you don't do any of them, that means you're running out of 90 as opposed to out of 100, right? I will consider it. My course is the most important course. Sorry.
Very important. Very important.
I'm joking. But yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that homage. But let me go back to this. Let me go back to content. So under content, you'll see in the week 3 area, there is this my favorite things thing. And what I want you to do is use my exercise that I made from class, right? Create an array that contains a list of your favorite things. Each thing should be a string. Don't make it an object, okay, like I did, okay? Use a loop to create a number of list items in an unordered list. Whoa, what the heck is this? I never taught you how to do this, right? To match your list of favorite things. The list should display somewhere on the About page. Let's make it in the bottom of the About page, right? Use GitHub pages to post your project online. I want you to post it. I want to be able to check your project. So going with what we did yesterday. Yesterday we talked about GitHub pages. I want you to use it today. I want to see that everyone knows how to post something. And this is an important lab because if you've done this, you've done a lot of what you need for assignment number 1 already, right? So here's a zip archive of your project files. I need that. Some people do not provide me a separate link. Don't embed it in your zip archive. I will make you lose 1 mark right there, right? Because in the submission requirements, you need both a zip archive and a link in your submission details. Most people got this right. Some people didn't. You lose 1 mark out of 2 if you didn't do that properly, right? And a link to your live site on GitHub. So now there's 3 potential places where you can lose a mark, right? If you don't give me a zip archive, you lose a mark. If you don't give me a link, you lose a mark. There's only 2 marks. That means if you don't do 2 of these, you get 0, right? That's how it's going to be. So please follow the instructions. But there's one part 3, that you don't know what to do because I haven't shown you how to do this. Let's do it together. So I'm leaving this up here. Let's put this up on GitHub so you have this stuff. So I'll say, I'll use the tool this time around, and I'll add this to the staging area. And I'll say that I just kind of demoed loops and loops exactly equals and more arrays. That's what I did. Push. Okay, so you've got all that. It's up there for you guys. But now we want to add this other piece. And I only want to make it so it's on the About page. Okay. So we've done a lot of work up to this point. And this is the last piece that I want to show you for today and for this week. It's a little bit more, I'm going to say, ahead of its time, right? So I'm not going to do everything that I would ask you to do normally, okay? In fact, what I'm going to do is inside the Jumbotron, right, just to make it easy, in the Jumbotron of my About page, only my About page, I'm going to add an empty UL. Right? So there's going to be a UL. What's a UL? Unordered list. This comes from COMP125 when you did your HTML, or I think it was COMP125, HTML and CSS. I want to give it an ID, which is, you know, my favorite things. Some really long ID. Yay! All right, so the list is empty. There's no list items. I want to create the list items with JavaScript, and I want to loop through each of my lists, my items in my array, right? And I want to put them inside this list. So now this is a real practical use of arrays, right? And a for loop that we haven't done before. This is the practical example, which I want you guys to try, right? So fine, I have something to hook into. Last week was how do I hook into objects on my page? That was the lab last week. It was a very simple lab. I gave you the solution pretty much. I'm going to give you the solution again, right, for this one. This is just you practicing on how to do it and seeing it for the first time, right? By the way, these labs, all of them that are going to be up online, right? Great to work with when you're on your exam, your midterm. It's going to be, I'm going to ask you to do some of this stuff, right? So you need to know how to do it. All right, so that's good. So I've got something to hook into on my About page, only my About page. And now in my app.js, I have this array, my array. I'll leave it here for now. We don't care about it. We also have some other associative array, which is down here. We'll leave that too, just for an example, right? And we have this for loop that didn't work, so we'll get rid of it. But what we'll do is create a new array called my favorite things. First of all, I need to have a connection to my UL, right? So we'll say my favorite list, right? My favorites list. Called my favorites list. And we're going to use document.getElementById. Document.getElementById. And then I think I called it my favorite. I don't know what I called it. I can't remember. This one, my favorite things. Okay. My favorite things. That's where it's connected to. So my favorites list is equal to document.getElementById, my favorite things. It's just hooking into that UL, that unordered list that's empty, right? So again, I'm going to make some comments. Say hook into, you know, an UL, a UL that is empty, that has an ID of my favorite things, right? That's what it does. That's what this does, because I need you guys to understand how to hook into stuff. If you don't know how to hook into stuff, I'm saying hook into, this is my language, really what it is getting a reference to an object that's inside of your document. That's what the real way of doing it is, right? I'm just calling it hook into to make it easy for you guys to understand. If you don't know how to do this, you can't do anything with JavaScript in the DOM. You need to know how to do this. This is like critical skill, right? All right, now that I've hooked into it, I want to add something to that. And you can add things to an object by using Appendchild. Appendchild, okay? So think about this. Now I want to append something. I need to append an object, and I need a list item. But I don't have a list item. I need to create an object. Each element inside my page is actually an object, right? So what you can do is you can say, I want my list item, or we'll call this a new item, right? I want my new item to be of type list item, right? So I want to do document dot create element, right? And I want to choose one of these elements. You can see that I have an option to choose any element I want. Well, I want to choose the list item element, right? So what I'm doing is I'm creating an element that's called list item. So my new item is actually of list item, of type list item. And if I do this, and if I say that my favorite lists dot Appendchild, new item, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new list item in code. That's all I'm doing. And then I'm adding it to my UL. That's what I'm doing. I'm adding the list item to my unordered list. Okay? How does this look? Let's do a console log. I do a console log of my favorite lists. Right? Here's my favorite list. And if I go back to this, you can see that on the bottom I have this little dot. Right? Because what I'm actually getting is this. I just put a new list item in there. That's all I did. But the list item is empty. Nothing inside the list, right? I want to populate that list item with stuff. So what I can do is, I got my list item. Here's my new item, right? Well, now that I've got before I do this, there's a middle intermediate step that I want to kind of add some text. I can say that, well, my new item, let's check this out. Can I do this? My new item dot text content. Can I do that? My new item text content is equal to hello, right? Hold on. You got it. But let's just see how this works. Does it work? Right? So there's my list item, and you can see that inside there I have this inner text that says hello. Here's hello. So it actually shows the list item right here, right? So I'm injecting both the text content and so first I create a new list item, then I inject the text content in there, and then I attach it to my favorites list. Okay? If I don't do it this way, I got nothing, right? So the Appendchild, what it does is remember in the document object model, it's a bunch of containers, right? So I've got my div tag. I've got a bunch of children in my div tag. And if you look at my actual page, right, my about page, here's my div tag. This is the parent node, right? My H1, my paragraph, my HR, my paragraph, my UL, all these are child nodes. So when I say add or append child, it actually adds it to the bottom of the nodes, right? When I'm appending child, I'm not appending child to the div tag. I'm appending child to the UL because the UL itself is also a container, and it can have several children. Each list item is a child of the unordered list container. That's what it is, right? So if I wanted to do this, and I wanted to add it to my div tag, I would say, okay, now I need to get a reference to my div tag, right? A div tag with an ID of Jumbotron. I need to get a reference to that. And then I would do an append child UL with an idea of my favorite things. Okay? I'm not going to go there yet because there's another lesson that I'm going to do with document object model. We're going to do a lot of this kind of stuff. But for now, I want you to know that that's the key thing I need to do here, right? These are the steps. That's really loud. So let me just go through these steps, right? Okay, this is great, right? But this only does one item. I want you to do the whole list of favorites, right? Well, let's make my favorite list. I'll do it up here. So I'll say, let my favorite things list the new array. Let's talk about my favorite things. What are those things? Well, I want to add a couple of things. I want to say that, I don't know, let's add some stuff. And I'll do it in a list as a list of strings. I'll say, video games. That's kind of one of my favorite things. And how about movies? That's another favorite thing of mine. And how about cars? That's kind of really cool. And I don't know, how about space flight? Especially faster than light travel. I don't know. And so on. I can put some other stuff that's my favorite thing. VR is my favorite thing. I don't know. Other bad things that'll be part of my favorite things. So you can put in there. I don't care what they are, right? But I got 4 things that are part of my favorite things. And if I save this and I hover over the list, you can see that it's a list of type string. String list. A list or an array of strings. That's what this second syntax is up here, where it says string and then square brackets. That's what this is showing you. String array. Okay? So I've got a string array here. So I can loop through my favorite things list and then go through each item. And I want to do this for each of the items. So how do I do that? Well, I've already hooked into my favorite thing, so I don't have to do that anymore. I only do that once. Right, so somewhere in here, I got to do my for loop, right? Now, there's different loops I can use. Let's use a for each, right? So I'll go for each, and I'm going to kind of target my favorite things list, my favorite things list. This is it, right? And for each thing in my favorite things list, right, I want to do this. I want to do this for each of my things in my favorite thing list, right? But I don't want to do this. Hello, I want to replace whatever the thing is. So let's do this. Let's take all this, cut it, go over here, place it in. And yeah, I can do it for you guys, but I want you to think about it for yourself. What's all this mean? So this is good, but it's not going to be hello. It's going to be, what's it going to be? So thing is the thing, right? It's the string. Right? Because thing is the string, and I'm taking my text content, and I'm taking the thing that's inside my list, and I'm going to attach it to my text content. And I'm going to keep doing this for each thing in my list. Right? And then I can print out what my favorite things is list here. Let's take a look and see if that works. Yeah, video games, movies, cars, and spaceflight. Right? How did I do that? I looped through and I created a bunch of list items. Each list item was created from the list, my array list that I created, right? And I've appended them by attaching them to the bottom of the unordered list every single time. That's what I'm doing through a loop. Okay, your job. I don't want you using a for each loop. I want you to make your own loop, some other loop that does this. It could be a while loop, it could be a for loop, it could be a for in loop, it could be a for of loop, but it can't be a for each loop because that would be just exactly what I've given you, right? A little bit of challenge, figure it out, right? So change the loop type and make sure that this works exactly the same way, right? You can, of course, please choose your own favorite things. That's another thing. I don't want to see video games, movies, cars, and spaceflight unless that is exactly in the order that you like your favorite things, all right? So make up your own favorite things. And this is what I want you to submit. And you need to make this live. We talked about how to make this live yesterday. So that is another piece you need to do on your own, right? If you don't do it live, you lose the point. If you don't give me your GitHub link, you lose the point. Might as well not even count it in at that point, right? Any other loop that will work for this, use. You can use a for loop, you can use a for of or for in, but you can't use a for each. That is like a no-no. Don't use a for each, okay? That's your assignment. You have 10 minutes if you want to begin right now. I'm going to stop right now, and then it'll allow you time to ask some questions or whatever. All right, so I'm going to stop recording this right now, and then hopefully we'll get some questions for you guys next week. All right?